Hello everyone. Today in this video we are going to cover all the questions and detailed explanation related to cost center accounting. So which activity type category requires that you enter the price and quantity allocated with activity allocation? So that it is manual. For manually we have to enter the price and manually we have to enter the quantity. It's a manual category. This question is referring to how an activity price is calculated and the quantity allocated. The activity price is calculated manually and the allocation quantity is entered manually. Indirect means the calculation is carried out by the system. So which master data in functions of CO can be grouped? So we can group cost elements, we can group internal orders, we can group statistical key figures. The master data components of cost center accounting can be grouped. Internal orders can also be grouped. Controlling areas cannot be grouped. All master data elements can be grouped, but controlling areas cannot be grouped. True or false? The third question is true or false. Cost element master data requires a cost element category. Yes, it requires a cost element category. If we remember the GL master creation, while GL master creation, when we select the operating expenses account type, it is a mandatory field which we need to upload, that is cost element category. Cost elements are now formed in FI master data, but the cost element category is still required. These categories are the same as those used prior to SAP S4 HANA. Fourth question is, in GL account master data, each account must contain which of the following? So it should be an account type. Here in the question we should pay attention to the word must. Okay, so the account type is a new master data field in SAP S4 HANA that is required for all accounts. The cost element category is required only if cost elements are created. The category is not required for FI balance accounts or income statement accounts. A cost object is not required until postings occur. So true or false? SAP, fifth question is true or false? SAP has mandatory standard hierarchies. Yes, the cost centers, profit centers and business processes requires assignments to a standard hierarchy. Other hierarchies can be built for cost center master data elements but are not required. So here we know like cost center hierarchy, profit center hierarchy and business processes require assignments to a standard hierarchy. Other hierarchies can be built for cost center master data elements but are not required. Okay, so sixth question, which SAP S4 HANA function provides methods to automatically assign accounts to cost objects? So automatically assign accounts to cost objects. It is like we can assign it through automatic assignment to table OKB9 and through substitution. There is no cost object to master data. Okay. From cost object master data is nothing but like cost center master data, profit center master data. Now before it was there, like we can assign the in the, I think it should be in GL master, I think we can assign the cost center, but now that option is totally removed. Not in failed status and not in validation we cannot um, automatically assign any of the value, just it will provide the error message or warning message if the entered value is incorrect. So the correct answers are A. So the correct answer is A and C. In SAP S/4HANA, you can still use automatic account assignment with table OKB9. You can use a substitution to automatically set the cost object, but using master data is no longer an option. Validations just verify account assignments, they don't set account assignments. Where are the day-to-day accounts we use for cost centers activated? So the cost centers which we assign are related to the GL accounts in operating chart of accounts. The accounts that are, we don't use any local chart, or I don't think we have any GL chart. So the accounts that are used in CO are part of the accounts called the operating chart of accounts. Other accounts may not be part of daily operations, and these accounts would not be relevant to CO. FI may use other account charts for statutory reporting. What function does the cost center category provide? What function does the cost center category provide? So it default setting for the cost center, it is not like available cost and available profit centers. The cost center category, a required setting, is a method of setting default parameters for a cost center. This category also assigns a key that can be used to include or exclude cost centers from activity type assignments. CO allocations may need corrections. What is the effect of reverse and rebook? So in this the correct answer is C. Reverse value of previous periods and repost the correction in the current period. But the other two options says reverse allocations for several months and rebook in original periods, reverse current period and rebook to the previous period. No. So the correct answer is C. You have the option of reversing allocations in previous periods. A credit posting would be entered and new debit posting created, which would require opening prior periods. Even though allocations are CO relevant, many organizations don't want to allow adjustments after period end close. Cost centers can allocate to many different objects. Yep, we can assign cost centers to all types of cost objects. The options available depend on the allocation method. Allocations can send value and quantities to other object types. So another question is true or false question. An attribute of cost centers is their ability to perform period end settlement. No, cost centers don't do any kind of period end settlement, but it uses some methods. Settlement is not possible for a cost center. Orders and projects can settle. Period end settlement is a process that transfers a current period value to other objects or a GL account. The detail is still visible, but the overall value of the object is 0. Where do non-operating expense accounts posts? Normally it posts in FI. Non-operating accounts are only available to FI. These income statement accounts are available for FI reporting when you don't want to include a CO object. The accounts become reconciling items between FI and CO. When comparing manual reposting of costs and repost line items, which is true? Manual reposting will link to the original document. No, it doesn't link. But reposting line items does. It will link to the original document. Repost line reposted line items may link to FI document and validate against it, but the values won't change. Repost line items will validate against the FI line item. Repost line items will update the original FI posting. Manual repostings only create CO postings. So here in this, manual reposting does not link to the original document. So first option is deleted, but reposting line items does. Validate against the, so repost will validate against the FI line item. Repost will update the reposted line items may link to the FI document. So updating the FI document while repost line items will not happen. So the answer is B. What is the feature that distinguishes between fixed and variable costs? So secondary cost element, variable cost element. So activity quantity. SAP refers to activity dependent cost values that vary with changes in activity quantity. So activity dependent cost. So it depends on the activity, how much activity is done. No settings distinguish between fixed costs and variable costs. When you post costs without reference to a quantity, the costs are always fixed. Yes. So which allocations use the cycle segment method? So costing sheet, periodic reposting, assessment, direct activity allocation. So periodic reposting, it's a cycle, and assessment is also a cycle. So periodic reposting, distribution, assessment, and indirect activity allocations all use cycle segment methods. A cycle contains a set of allocation steps called segments. So there will be steps. The steps are called segments. Activity allocation directly assigns a quantity from a cost center to another cost object. So which allocations use the, so these are the ones. Activity allocation directly assigns a quality from the cost center quantity to another cost object. How can you configure cycles for period end allocation? Create cycles that iterate with each other. Use different allocations rules within one segment. Assign several segments to a cycle. Define allocation for the same cost center in multiple segments. Yep, the same cost center amount can be allocated to different cost objects because we accrue the costs of all the activities in a single cost center, then we will distribute it at the period end. So how can you configure cycles for period end allocation? So this C and D are the, so C and D are the correct answers for this period end allocation. The cycles cannot iterate with each other, only segments within a cycle can. Each segment only has one tracing factor. Different segments can have different allocation rules but still be assigned to the same cycle. Different segments can have different allocation rules but still be assigned to the same cycle. Each segment has an independent set of senders and receivers. You can reuse cost objects and cost elements. So what can you specify when you create an activity type? So the primary cost GL account for internal activity allocation, the valid receiving cost center types, the valid sending cost center types, the secondary costs GL account for internal activity allocation. We don't need a primary cost, the secondary cost. When you create an activity type, secondary cost, the activity type category for allocation, and the valid sending, what is that, sending or receiving? It should be sending cost center types. So activity types only use secondary cost elements and are an internal allocation. Receivers are not limited to cost centers. The receiver is identified in the allocation process. The cost element category represents possible cost centers. The cost element category. The cost element category represents possible cost centers. The activity type category identifies how the allocation is executed and how the prices are calculated. Okay, so for the activity, the primary cost GL account for internal activity allocation. For internal activity, normally we use secondary costs, the valid receiving cost center types, the valid sending cost center types. So activity type and the activity type category for allocation. Yes, this and secondary cost is okay. So valid receiving and valid sending, that we need to see. So receivers are not limited to the cost centers. Okay, receivers can be many. The receiver is identified in the allocation process. The cost and cost element category represents possible cost centers. The activity type category identifies how the allocation is executed. So what is the highest overhead cost reporting level in CO? So it is like, so we have to remember that it is a overhead cost reporting level in CO. It's not the overall reporting level in CO. It is just overhead cost reporting. So we should consider controlling area, otherwise it will be cooperating concern. The controlling area is the top level for overhead reporting. Company code is relevant for FI reporting. Cost center hierarchy is a master data grouping, not an organizational level. Operating concern is the top organizational element of CO, but the cost object is COPA. Okay. When do you select the percentage method for accrual calculation? There are two correct answers. When you accrue activity independent costs, so when do you select the percentage method for accrual calculation? When you accrue activity independent costs. Okay, it is not dependent, independent cost, and an appropriate cost element is not available. When you accrue activity dependent cost and appropriate cost elements are defining overhead rates is available. So it should, there should be definitely an overhead rate is available when you accrue activity independent cost and an appropriate cost element. So it will be activity dependent or activity independent cost, but the appropriate cost element for defining overhead rates is available. Should be C. When you would select the percentage method, when you accrue activity dependent costs and when you accrue activity independent costs, and if an appropriate cost element for defining overhead rates is available. Activity dependent costs are used for the target equal to actual, since this process is based on quantity. Dependent are used activity dependent costs. When we use activity dependent cost, used for target equal to actual, since this process is based on quantity. How much quantity, the cost will be that much. So target equal to actual. True or false? You would like to conceal the original cost element in an allocation. You should choose a distribution. No, it is false. Distribution is 1:1 primary, which means the receiver will. So distribution is 1:1 primary, which means that the receiver will see everything the sender has as values. The correct option is assessment. Assessment group primary and secondary costs together. The receiver will only see the secondary cost element used for the assessment. When is the standard hierarchy of the cost center identified? When is the standard hierarchy of the, so we have identified it while creating the controlling area. When the controlling area is defined, you will specify the standard hierarchy for cost centers when you define the controlling area is created. This setting is mandatory and identifies the hierarchy name required for all cost centers created in the controlling area. The other options are like when the controlling area is assigned to operating concern, when the first cost center of a controlling area is created, when the first company code is assigned to the controlling area. No, it is when controlling area is defined. When would you define assessment cycles for the period end closing in overhead cost accounting? When would you define assessment cycles for the period end closing in overhead cost accounting? Mm, Transfer a primary cost element to the sender. Transfer primary cost elements from an order to a receiver. Transfer a secondary cost element to the receiver. Transfer primary and secondary to the secondary cost. It is obviously D. And transfer a secondary cost element to the receiver. So even we can use for this. Transfer primary cost elements from an order to a receiver. No. Transfer a primary cost element to the sender. No, it's wrong. So you can use assessment to send primary and secondary cost to a secondary cost element in the receiver. The receiver only see a secondary cost. Distributions and periodic repostings send only primary cost elements. Oh, okay. And periodic repostings send only primary cost elements. But assessment can send both primary and secondary costs. Which object can you assign the cycle segment? There are three correct answers. Can you assign to the cycle segment? We can assign statistical key figures, not definitely the balance sheet accounts, say non-operating expense accounts. So the answer is B, D, and E. Non-operating expense accounts are profit and loss accounts in FI only, so they cannot be allocated in CO. Indirect activity allocations can send activity quantities and prices. Balance sheets are not relevant to CO. Secondary cost elements can be allocated in assessment. Statistical key figures can be used as a tracing factor. Which activities can you perform while you create cost center hierarchies? So we can append nodes and cost centers to a node of the standard hierarchy. Assign a standard hierarchy to several controlling areas. No. Create a cost center without specifying a standard hierarchy. No, reassign a cost center to another node of the standard hierarchy A and D. You can assign a cost center to a standard hierarchy node, but you cannot create new nodes. Cost center to a not create new. You can only have a cost center in one controlling area at a time. You cannot create a cost center without specifying a standard hierarchy. Which characteristic controls the eligible cost element categories for GL accounts in SAP S4HANA? Eligible, so it is account type. The new field account type controls what kind of account is being defined, which field status group means field status group control, how fields are treated on screen. Account currency doesn't affect CO. Account groups dictate number ranges and default settings. So what configuration is possible when you assign multiple company codes to a controlling area in SAP S4HANA? So if we want to assign multiple company codes, the operating chart of accounts should be similar in the controlling area and the company code. The company code currency may differ from controlling area currency because there is an option to assign multiple company codes and each company code has its own currency. The company code fiscal year variant may differ from the, no, it is wrong. The company code operational chart of accounts may differ, no. And so even D, the company code fiscal year variant may differ from the controlling area fiscal year variant in the number of periods and the number of special periods. No, it is not at all acceptable. Only A. Both options 1:1 or N:1 company code to controlling area have the same chart of accounts and fiscal year variant. The only separate posting between the two options is the company code currency, which may be different from the controlling area currency in the N:1 option. Which CO currencies can you use for evaluation when you use cross company code cost accounting? Very good question. There are three correct answers. Which CO currencies can you use for evaluation? Controlling area currency, company code currency, and transaction currency. So A, B, D are the options. When assigning a company code specific controlling area, if the controlling area and company code are in a 1:1 relationship, the currency must be the same. Normally, the object currency is the company code currency. So, which is can you use for evaluating new cross company code? It is controlling area, company code, and transaction currency. So, these are all the questions which we have covered from our previous video which I posted for cost center accounting. So if you watch that previous video, you can easily answer these questions without any issues. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching this video. Soon we will meet with another video which I am planning to do on internal orders. Thank you so much.